All right, I think we can get started while we're waiting for other panelists to join. We actually have different parts of it. First of all, we're going to be listening to Device Alliance folks, and they will be giving us an overview of Device Alliance and also about the medical device industry in Orange County. Then after that, there will be a panel discussion, and then we will share a link for you to join the e-networking session. So welcome you all to GPS STEM's career and professional development, career exploration part of the programming. And today you're going to learn about the careers, many different careers which are available in medical device industry for PhD students and postdocs from all STEM disciplines. This event is in collaboration with Device Alliance Young Professional Committee, and we have Erin Tsunga and Joanne Lee, who is also part of GPS STEM's Trainee Council. She serves as an advisory member in both the organizations. So with that, I will give it to Joanne, and she can walk us through the program detail agenda, and she'll take over for the next steps. Thank you, Joanne. Please go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Harinder. As Harinder said, we're here with the Young Professional Committee, and that'll be something Erin will describe a little bit more. But in terms of the schedule, we're looking at just a check-in till about 4:45-ish, and we might get started a little bit early. But we'll have an introduction by Erin to introduce Device Alliance, as well as a broad overview of the medical device industry. This is especially great for individuals who aren't sure what the medtech field looks like and what it actually touches, but also gives you sort of an inside look as to how you can find yourself in that space. Then we'll move on into some brief introductions of our beautiful panel, and I'll be helping moderate that. With our panel, we have Erin as well in there after the introduction, but Harish, oh my goodness, Chelsea, Paul, and Christopher here all with us. And then afterwards, we will do some quick Q&A if there are any. If not, then we'll move into another Zoom meeting that will have our breakout rooms, and you'll receive that link via chat as well as via your email if you miss out on that. If you haven't looked at your email yet, you should have received a event pamphlet that includes speaker bios as well as the schedule for tonight. And if you haven't checked your email or you didn't receive one, you can go ahead and go to that link, tinyurl.com/medtechcareerbios, and you can find the document there. So without further ado, did you want to get started early, Harinder, or give it a few more minutes?
We can give it a few minutes, and I think there are a couple of things I would like to add, which I should have said earlier, but there's a lot of background noise behind me. So things like questions and answers, try to hold on to your questions until the presentation is over by Erin, but in the meantime, you can type into chat and we'll make sure that those questions get answered in the end. And second thing, when we are during the panel discussion, we'll have first part of the panel discussion where we will ask some structured questions. If you can type your questions in the chat box, we will make sure that those relevant questions get asked right at that point. Otherwise, we will wait in the end for those questions to be posed to our panelists. And the last part is, if you are, of course, you're on your computer, and if you will be opening your email on the side at some point, you will get an email with a Zoom link to join the e-networking part of this event. So we will also be adding that link into chat in a little bit. So you can use that link to sign in, or you can go back and open your email and use that link to sign into the e-networking rooms. But this event has to end first, and we'll give you a couple of minutes for you to go grab a beer, wine, or whatever you want to eat or drink, and then come back. We'll meet in the networking rooms. And within a few minutes after that, we will start and divide you into different rooms, where each room will be, we'll have one panelist, and those rounds will be 10 minutes each and will rotate. So you get to talk to all the panelists. We can, if there's nothing more, we can maybe wait for a minute too, or we can get started, whatever you feel, Joanne.
Why don't we go ahead and let Erin set up her PowerPoint? in case
Sure.
there's any technical difficulties there.
Sure.
How does it look? Can you see it?
I see it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Erin, do you want to go ahead and get us started?
Sure. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Like Joanne said earlier, my name is Erin Sunga, and I not only am here representing myself and the career that I have as part of the panel, but also as part of Device Alliance. Here's our agenda, like Joanne has already gone through. We'll go over to the next slide. So who are we? So we're Device Alliance, and we focus on the medical device industry here in Southern California, and we are based out of Irvine. We have events every month, which kind of is a little weird right now because of the whole COVID-19 situation. But we try to drive collaboration through networking and just getting the industry together across all the different companies that are out here in Orange County. We focus on career development through workshops, and we have podcasts that we release on LinkedIn, and we also have white papers that we've been releasing on LinkedIn as well that you can take a look at and just learn a little bit more of what's going on in the industry. Actually, here on the left slide, like the left image, is from one of our events that we had at Endologix, which is my current company here, but I attended prior to working at Endologix. And we just got to learn a lot about the company and what they do, and just got to connect with all their different employees. So that's kind of how I was able to network with the company prior to that. So that's something that we like to do a lot, is go to companies and learn about what they do so they can also advertise and what positions they might have open, but also just get everyone together and just network and find out what everyone's working on. And as part of Device Alliance, we also have the Young Professionals Committee. So we're the younger generation, usually students or recent grads that are still trying to figure out what we want to do in the industry and how to get into the industry. And we focus on bridging that gap between the younger generation and those that are seasoned veterans in the industry. And we kind of try to focus on specific young professionals events through networking and how to network, because sometimes you might be a little nervous about going to a large networking event, and how do you introduce yourself, or how do you talk to people that you've never met. So that's what we kind of try to focus on as well. Right now we're actually currently in our mentorship program, so we connect those in the younger generation with those that are either similar in their industries or similar departments, or anything that's of interest that you can learn about. So we love to do that as well. And thirdly, we like to focus on internship and career opportunities. So we have a large network, and people are always looking for the young generations to come and fill these entry-level positions. So we like to connect people. So we always try to look out for those as well. We actually have an event coming up next week, and it's a free webinar event since we're all doing webinar events right now. So this one's really interesting. We're just going to be talking about innovation and entrepreneurship, and we're going to have some people that are entrepreneurs trying to speak a little of their magic about what they've been doing and how they can possibly help you maybe open a company maybe in the future, or just learn about what's going on in the industry as well. So if you want to check that out, that's next Thursday. You can register at our website or just go on our website and find out about the other events that are going on. So if you're not really familiar with medical devices or the life science industry, I want to give a little bit of an overview of that as well. So life science industry is a very large industry. You can see it goes from cosmetics to the food processing, environmental, but we focus on the biomedical devices sector of the life science industry. But U.S. scientists, mainly having PhDs or at UCI, couldn't fit into any of these, but we just focus on medical devices here in Orange County. So what is a medical device? So I took the long definition from the US FDA website, and you can see that it encompasses a lot of things. It can be an instrument or apparatus or even an in vitro reagent, but it's all around the fact that it doesn't have its primary chemical action or primary purpose is through chemical action. So it's not going to be like a pharmaceutical that you have to take a pill or you take medicine or something like that, and it's working within the body. So this will be a number of things, and you won't even think that medical devices impact you or you use a medical device, but there's actually a lot of things that you probably use daily that are considered medical devices. So anything that can cure, mitigate, treat, or help prevent any diseases. So let's kind of look at what are some medical devices that I got were kind of interesting. So medical devices can range from something very simple like a tongue depressor to something very complex like prosthetics or pacemakers. So a lot of people have glasses or contacts, so those are considered medical devices that you probably didn't realize that you have a medical device. Some people have smartwatches now, so those are starting to move towards medical devices as well, with the Apple Watch now having like the FDA approved EKG. So medical devices are going to start to penetrate our lives probably a little bit more than we realize. That's really exciting, and all the innovation that's coming around that. So what are the opportunities that maybe you guys want to know about? So I looked up a paper about the medical device industry or life sciences here in California, and I was really amazed on how many people are employed in this industry. So in California, 300,000 people are employed in life science industry, which is the most in the nation. So California is where it's at if you want to be here in this industry. And of that, more than half of them are in medical device companies. So it was really interesting to know that if you're looking to be in the medical device industry, this is the hub in Orange County specifically as well. So that was very exciting to see. There's a lot of opportunity here in Orange County if you plan on staying here. Even if you're from another state, maybe you want to come and join us in this sunny state. So I also wanted to just put together a slide about, like, this is not even probably half of the companies out there. These are just the ones that I'm aware of. So we have like the big hitters like Johnson & Johnson that you're probably familiar about with baby products or lotions and stuff like that, but they also have a medical device sector. Edwards Life Sciences, Medtronic, those are like the big ones, and then there might be some of the smaller that you're not familiar with, as like Microvention or Endologix is where I work. So there's a lot of other small ones as well that you might not even be aware of. And I personally, every time I have a Device Alliance event, I learn about a new company that's out here that I would have probably never known about. So we always learn about new things here in Orange County. So as part of a medical device industry, here are some of the different types of departments that I personally have worked with as well, and could be possibly an area that you might be of interest to you. So we obviously have the engineers that have to develop our products, and then we also have on the business side if you want to do more strategy and development. And then if you're more on the science side, you can always have preclinical with bench and animal testing, or you can be on the clinical side where it's actually human testing and designing trials and running trials, or you can be in more regulations, which I'm in regulatory affairs. So we have to make sure that we get our products to market and approved. So that's kind of where that is. And obviously sales and marketing. I've known a lot of people that go into sales and marketing that actually have a lot of science backgrounds because they're a little bit more familiar with the products and can articulate what our products do or how they work to the physicians or to the customers. So there's a lot of areas that you can go into and look into. So hopefully today we'll be able to kind of explore a little bit of them here with the different panelists here today. So yep, would love to speak to you guys about all the different departments. So some of the things that I've noticed in the industry, at least, as wearables, like I said earlier, these are really exciting things coming into our labs where we're going to be able to track our fitnesses, like we can do that now. But I've also seen my healthcare provider is starting to use Fitbits and Apple Watches to kind of see how you progress and give you discounts and stuff. So that's an interesting way of how it's penetrating into our health industry. Being in regulations, I've seen that it's also really tighter regulations. So there's a lot of demand for growing regulatory departments because there's stricter rules across the globe. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is very exciting. And so that's starting to slowly penetrate into the medical device industry. I would say that our industry is a little bit slower than maybe others, but it's exciting to see how artificial intelligence might be impacting our industry now because of this whole telemedicine now. And then obviously COVID-19 pandemic related, I've seen a lot of companies that have ventilators and pulse oximeters, they're growing and they're trying to build their business, and a lot of, they're opening a lot of jobs in those areas because they're obviously need more demand. So those are some little things that I thought were kind of interesting that are kind of happening in our industry, and can always look into that more online. So that might pique your interest. As students or recent grads, I wanted to kind of give these kind of 4 points of where you could begin. You might have these questions. I still have these kind of questions. What about the opportunities that are in the medical device industry? So hopefully we'll be able to kind of talk about that a little bit. How do you break into the industry without previous experience? I know I had this question when I was still in school. And then what are the resources that we can utilize? So hopefully we can kind of talk about that as well. And then how to differentiate yourself in this competitive industry. So that's kind of what I have today. I kind of wanted to put these questions in your head and maybe we can answer them today. Harinder or Joanne, would you like to take it on to the next part of today? Or do we want to open it up to maybe questions?
We have a couple minutes. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to a panel about anything that Erin has talked about or about the Device Alliance?
So Joanne, we have a question. You want to go ahead, take that?
You mentioned a pan flip included in our emails. I don't see an attachment. That might have been my mistake. But an alternative path to that is you can go ahead and click this link or copy paste that into your browser, and you should be able to have the pan flip, which has speaker bios as well.
So Alberto Soto has a question from Erin. Erin, so what are the current hiring trends in medical device industry?
I can't hear Erin, can you?
Sorry, I put myself on mute. When it comes to hiring trends, I've actually seen a lot of people reaching out to me personally about jobs and opening new positions in different companies right now. So there obviously are some companies that are struggling because of the pandemic, but there are some companies that are flourishing depending on the type of devices that they are manufacturing and they focus on. So there's definitely areas where they're booming. So we just need to look specifically to those areas. So I don't know if anyone else on the panel might speak to that for their company, so we can kind of talk about that maybe later if you want to hear about that as well. And then I see another question. Can you go over how to become a member? Sure. So you can go onto our website, devicealliance.org. I think I have the slide that has it on it.
I'll add that in the chat.
Okay, yeah. So you can go on there. There is a membership fee, but right now we do have if you're not interested in paying the fee quite yet, we do have our webinars right now for free, but normally when we do have our normal in-person meetings, they'll be usually around $30 to $35 per event. So for students right now, I believe the membership should be around, I think, $75. Can you correct me if I'm wrong, Joanne? So if you just go to 2 events or 3 events, you can make your money back on that membership. But it's not only the events that you can take advantage of. You can also be a part of the YPC, which is the Young Professionals Committee, and just be more involved and get a little bit more experience, maybe even just in leadership. And I know I've been learning how to communicate a little bit better because I know that was something that I was struggling. So I'm constantly still learning to be when I'm a part of Device Alliance.
I do want to add in terms of being a young professional, even as a student, if you're not looking for a job now, at some point you're going to be looking for a job. So making that opportunity a lot easier in terms of jumping from academia to industry, or maybe if you're staying in academia, once you start your own lab, how are you able to build bigger sort of collaborations with companies outside with industry funding that can give you a leg up in terms of staying in academia. So there are a lot of good reasons to start networking now, even if you're not intending to find a job or be in the industry specifically. And you also get to explore a lot of different options just through informational interviews, if not just talking with people. And it's great that you never know who you'll meet in the sense that they could be your next boss. They could be your greatest advocate in terms of a position. So if a position opens up, you're the first person that they think of, or they could just be a really good mentor in terms of life guidance, career guidance, or anything in between. There's another question, Erin. We should wait. Oh. Perhaps we can go ahead and what resources did you utilize to land your first job? Kristen, once we get into the panel, you can ask that specifically. And maybe everyone else could also address that question too. I'm sure everyone has their own different unique way of getting into their position, and therefore you'll also get a lot more answers. Okay, so shall we go ahead and transition into our panel then?
Yeah, go ahead. And Kristen, I'll make sure that your question gets asked.
Thank you, Harinder. Okay, perfect. Let me go ahead and prep my screen. All right. So thank you, Erin, for the insight. And I love that you touch on how medical devices are so fully integrated into our lives, even though we sort of no longer really realize it, with glasses being sort of something so common, or Band-Aids. And so this part of the event now will focus on these lovely 5 panelists we have here. I'm going to very briefly introduce them. They will do the hard work of introducing themselves, but I'm sure they can do a much better job. Again, if you want to read about their bios, we do have a pamphlet. I'll go ahead and get that pasted into the chat again. But for tonight, just going down the list, we have, again, Erin Sangha. She has her master's in business and science. And then we have Paul Stein. If I butcher your name, I'm going to apologize. He has his PhD. Chris Wagner also has his PhD. Chelsea Gregg also has her PhD. Harish Dixit has his PhD. And Sorish, hey, you finally got to hop on. Perfect timing. He has his master's in, I believe, biomedical engineering. And so we sort of have a range between master's and PhD, and you'll sort of be able to see how that integrates into the medical device career. Thank you, Ranger. And so in terms of the questions and orders, we'll have 3 to 4 structured questions, and then we'll open the floor up for questions from the audience. And then moving on from there, we'll go to our e-networking. So for the first question, I'll go ahead and ask Chelsea to start for us. Go ahead and please introduce yourself, your educational background, job history, and how did you get into the medtech industry? And if you have any particular career goals or purpose.
Wow, that's a big question. So as I was introduced, I'm Chelsea Gregg. I have a PhD in biomedical engineering from Cornell University, where I did minors in applied physics and biology. Right now, I'm a principal research and development engineer for Medtronic Neurovascular, which is located here in Irvine on the UCI campus. And I'm currently the technical lead of one of our new product development projects. And so in that role that I have right now, what I occupy a lot of my time with right now is I'm really responsible for setting the strategic direction of our project and aligning that to the overall business strategy that we're trying to execute to, and those goals. And so I serve largely as the technical voice for the team, for all the engineers on the team. So that would include myself, R&D, but also that extends to our quality counterparts and our operations and manufacturing counterparts largely as well. And then I'm really responsible for driving kind of across all those engineering disciplines to meet our strategy from a technical perspective. So that's largely what my work looks like right now, kind of day in and day out. I've been with Medtronic for about 3 years. Prior to that, I did a postdoctoral fellowship at the FDA in the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, which is the part of the FDA where all medical devices go through. And it's a different part that stands alone from the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, which is where all pharmaceuticals go, or the Center for Biologics, which is where all biological agents will go. So it's purely for medical devices. And I spent a 9-month postdoc there that was a very structured kind of short-term postdoc. And prior to that, I was at Cornell University doing my PhD. So that's kind of what my career path looks like and trajectory so far coming out of graduate school. And then now within the last year, I've stepped into the role of a technical lead in new product development. So that's somewhat new within the last 12 months. So I will be continuing on that path and then, see where that's going from there. But I do really enjoy kind of my time within research and development. It's a really fun and exciting place to be. And so I'll probably be moving into a lot more of like the advanced technology space, which is kind of that early stage kind of pre-product development space, and kind of overall like long-term technical strategy.
Thank you, Chelsea. Harish?
Hello, everyone. My name is Harish Dixit. I am a senior preclinical researcher at Stryker Neurovascular. So just like Chelsea, we work on medical devices related to stroke care. So I am in the hemorrhagic space for our new product development and new technology development. So I work specifically on flow diversion technology to treat aneurysms in the human neurovasculature. Before that, I was actually, in a way, 1 order of magnitude lower in my research. So my PhD focused on leveraging the silicon and semiconductor technology to apply it towards cell therapy. So namely, using genetic engineering to confer immunity for cancer in patients. So we collaborated a lot with City of Hope out in Duarte, California. And that kind of set the stage for my interest in moving into the preclinical world, because I had gotten, to be frank, enough of cell culture experience during my 6 years as a PhD student, and I wanted to move into a new field of R&D. So preclin kind of is I guess, middle ground between true R&D engineering and then has its hands in multiple portions of device development. So we do work very closely with R&D at Stryker. We also work with quality, with marketing, and kind of liaise amongst all of those different groups to drive forward product development. So from the day-to-day, I kind of work on the development and technical execution of animal studies and benchtop evaluations, along with physician evaluations in-house, and mostly with new model development, especially with silicone models, which has gotten a lot of limelight in the recent years due to new imaging technology and leaps in that space. That's me.
Thank you, Harsh. Erin, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Erin Senga again. I work in the Regulatory Affairs Department at Endologix. So we mainly work on, at least my team works on, getting approvals in the US and the EU, and maintaining those registrations with anything that changes to our device or anything that we're trying to innovate on our devices. So that's kind of what I work on, is working on submissions, so a lot of writing, and submitting those to regulatory bodies and making sure that they understand that what we're trying to do, and we have to get approval from those governments in order to sell our products in those countries. Prior to working at Endologix, I worked at Medtronic, and there I worked on regulatory affairs again, but I was in the international team. So we worked primarily on anything outside of the United States, Asia, everything, everything except United States and Europe. That was my first job out of school, so that was a really interesting experience. Prior to that, I was in my master's program at Keck Graduate Institute, where I was getting my master's in business and science. So that program is a little bit of a combination of science, business, and regulations, since it primarily works or focuses on life science industry. So that was a little bit exciting for me, at least, because most MBAs, they are more broad and generic. So I really wanted something within the life science industry, and that's kind of where I got into regulations. And we had to take classes about regulatory affairs, because our industry is very special in the fact that we need to make sure that we followed all these regulations, get approval through the FDA or whatever notified body you have in the EU, and then you can sell and market them. So that's kind of how I got into regulatory affairs. Prior to that, I was in engineering, so I didn't see myself as an engineer. I always thought I was going to be an engineer, and in science at least, and somehow through my master's, I ended up in regulatory affairs. So you never know where you might go following your degrees. I'm still in an area that relates to my degrees, but it just happened that now I do a lot of writing, which I never thought I would be doing in a cubicle. But yeah, that's me.
Always in a cubicle. Perfect. Thank you, Erin. Suresh, if I'm butchering your name, I'm so sorry.
No, that's rather well pronounced. Hi, everyone. My name is Suresh. My last name is very long. You pronounce it. I'm sure you guys are all interested in how to pronounce my last name. It's pronounced Bandyopadhyay. It's of Indian origin. Really long name. Unfortunately, there's two versions. They picked the long one to make everyone else's lives a bit more difficult.
So although I'm very familiar with that last name, but I struggled, and I just made sure that I don't do that spelling mistake, because there's a little bit of variation in that last name. But thanks for pointing that
Indeed.
out.
Indeed. So I'm actually a UCI alum. Went to undergrad there. When I started, I joined as an information and computer science. I was always interested in technology, but after joining and watching some of my dorm mates, some of the things they're doing in their biomedical engineering classes, and hearing about their projects and classwork, and seeing some lab presentations, I got really intrigued with biomedical engineering. There's a lot of really good research happening at UCI, which I got to be involved in through my lab experience, but that's what really inspired me and made me want to transition into switched to biomedical engineering. So eventually I graduated with my degree in biomedical engineering. However, I ended up completing my minor in computer science as well, material science. And in the process, I was also looking into biophotonics, because that was, especially when you talk about cell culture and some of those labs, you get into some of the photonics and you see the utility of it. So I really, through my undergrad experience, wanted to expose myself to as much as possible to help me answer the question what I wanted to do going into my next phase. I was fortunate enough to get an internship with a startup where I got really good experience in early product development. I started, basically, they put me in a machine shop and told me to go machine parts for their prototypes. And so I would do that, CAD modeling, testing, a bunch of things like that, which ultimately they didn't decide to hire me, unfortunately. So I joined another startup, also in Irvine, and they did ablation, lung ablation. So that was about 4 years of my career. I spent there working on catheters, steam ablation generators, handpieces, RF. Started exploring making steam with RF, coils, just a number of things in that startup environment. One of the things that you get to do in a startup is wear multiple hats. And we had the unfortunate event of getting our CE mark taken away from us due to some adverse events, and which led us to clinical trials. And I got a great amount of experience going through clinical trials in a randomized control trial, but also we were also starting up a lung cancer program where we needed to go from animal to first in humans, and seeing that progress really piqued my interest. So slowly I wanted to move more towards the clinical aspect, because I felt like that's where all of the engineering and R&D applications were leading to, and that's where you get to interact with the physicians and drive back some of the issues that they're having in terms of improving device design and things of that nature. The company, it was acquired, and they asked me to move to Seattle. Unfortunately, I've been in California way too long, so decided to stay in Southern California. And at the time I was getting my master's, I made some connections and decided, oh, what the heck, let me try some signal processing. So I actually joined a company doing an algorithms team, and started to utilize some of my computer science background to do signal processing and for a heart monitoring company. So did that for a few years, and but I think what I was really missing was the clinical piece there, in terms of it was nice being able to sit behind a computer and code and algorithms and look at data all day, but at the same time, I felt it was important to be close to the problem, be able to connect with the physicians and patients and the device issues that were near and dear to me. So I found a position in Edwards where it was kind of that cross-functional role in clinical development. And what clinical development is, it's a extension of R&D. So we do essentially R&D, we'll get it to animal stage, we'll work with them up to that stage, and then transition the product into first in human compassionate cases, following which we're really involved in the procedural development, so how you use the device. And seeing that through and how it evolves as it gets used in larger studies, so early feasibility studies, pivotal studies, and commercial world. So, kind of get to following it along the way of the product journey. And that's me today.
Perfect. Thank you for giving such an extensive look into your job history, especially about the early on stages where, internships mattered. That was what got you to your next step and moving forward. Next we have is Paul.
Sure. My name is Paul Stein. My PhD is in physiology from Albany Medical College, so I'm not an engineer. I had originally thought that with a degree in physiology, I was going to go into the pharmaceutical business. At the time, the industry was contracting severely. I had a number of interviews with drug companies, but I was never hired. I then moved on to postdocs. And it was there that I realized that academia was not for me. Trying to scope out 30, 40 years in a little niche, producing publications that very few would read and would have zero impact on healthcare in the world, I wanted to go into something else. I also understood that I was not really suited for sticking with one little thing all the time. I wanted to move on to working on a lot of other things. And I always worked and helped a lot of my graduate student and postdoc colleagues on their projects. So I understood for myself that a project-based kind of job for me was where I wanted to go. I saw this advertisement in Science magazine for a scientist position at Medtronic. I applied and I got it. I knew nothing about medical devices at all. But after I was there for just a little while, I understood that this was home for me. This was home for the rest of my career. So I started off as a staff scientist in pacing research. I then moved in the same sort of place as several other panelists, which was in the preclinical area. My PhD in physiology and my large animal research experience was very good for me becoming a study director to help all the engineers get their projects going and follow their projects according to the GLP regulations. And so I did that as a scientist and then a study director for 15 years with Medtronic. I then moved to other companies, pretty much doing the same sort of thing. EV3, also in Minnesota. I then went to St. Jude Medical, which is now Abbott. I was there for 6 years. My job roles changed sometimes significantly. I actually ran their animal facility for half of the year. But then after a while, I wanted to get into something that was more unique. And so I started to go from large companies into startups. So I went to an obesity startup called Onciomed down here in Orange County. They were sold and acquired. So I then went to another startup, Metronome Health in Laguna Hills. They're involved with a continuous glucose monitor. And my PhD in physiology really prepared me for working into a lot of different fields, cardiovascular, respiratory, endocrinology, you name it, I've been involved with it over the years. Recently though, now I have my own little startup. When you work in the medical device industry for a long period of time, you're going to end up with projects that you really loved and wanted to work on, but the company said, forget it. And so you kind of tuck these things in your back pocket and say, when the time's right for me, I'm going to work on it for myself. And that's where I am right now.
Perfect. I love that you have a very broad perspective, going from a large company now to very small and seeing from the bottom up, very different in terms of the perspective. Plus, not an engineer. You don't have to be an engineer to be in here. And last but not least, we have Chris.
Hello, my name is Chris Wagner. This set of backgrounds is great, and I think it highlights the diversity of careers you can have in the medical device industry, and I think that's been true for me as well. So I got my PhD from Harvard in surgical robotics or engineering sciences, but my focus was on surgical robotics. But my career path journey has been dictated a lot by my wife, who is an academic, so I didn't follow the academic path and she did, and so her jobs have been always a little bit more constrained than mine. So I've hopped around, and we were talking about careers, but I think the career is what you have when you look back and you try to string things together. I'm not sure if it's something that you have when looking forward, and especially to Aaron's point, you don't necessarily know where you're going to end up. So we moved to Michigan, where I did a series of small postdocs in steerable needles, stereo vision. I was working at a company that did small business research grants, but without ever intending to commercialize them. So we got really good at writing lots of bad grants. And so I had experience there with like MRI compatible actuators. And then since my background was surgical robotics and my wife had an opportunity in England, we moved to England to where I joined a surgical robot startup, and we were planning to be there for 1 or 2 years, and I stayed there for 11 years. I was at the surgical robot company for a year and a half, and then I started trying to do my own startups and consulting in orthopedics, where I did my own consulting and I partnered with some surgeons to a product-based company. And then I joined the company that I'm in now, Cambridge Consultants. We're kind of a different company in this kind of chain of how do you get medical devices to market. So they're the larger companies, they're startups, and we're an outsourced technology development firm. So we're 800 scientists and engineers around the world. The mothership's in Cambridge, UK, but there's 100 folks in Boston. There's 130 in Seattle. There's 30 in San Francisco, and there's me here in Irvine. And so we do outsourced medical, part of our business is medical product development. And so we work on behalf of both large companies and startups to do like next generation devices. I think we're one of the ones that have encoded more information in DNA than anybody else in the world. And we just did that in the building across the street. So as well as just regulated medical devices, and surgical robotics is what I'm continue to be interested in. So anyway, I'll leave it there to open up for questions, but just the way that I've gotten to where I am now is not necessarily a planned path.
I think that's something that we all could agree on, where your career is back and forth, and sometimes you go into a different path that you never even anticipated. So moving forward then, for our second question, really focusing on the types of skills that you developed while you were in your master's, your PhD, or your postdoc. What skills did you develop then that now currently serve you, and how do you use them on a day-to-day basis? Or what would you say the industry expects you to develop and need to use on a day-to-day basis? Why don't we go ahead and start with Paul? You're muted, Paul?
Yeah. Had to fix that. Okay. I think as a physiologist, I think it has helped me tremendously. Being a basic scientist, you really have to understand, the science and the literature, and it's very critical when you're in basic science to really understand what an experiment is, how to design a good experiment, know statistics, but also understand basically the physiology of the human body. And so sometimes I would get an engineer who would approach me and start to discuss his or her particular idea. And I would have to tell them, no, that's not how the human body works. It works this way. And they'll go, oh, okay. And they'll go back. For animal research, it's very, very important because you understand the anatomy and physiology. The engineer may or may not. Also being able to see if there are gaps in experimental design that an engineer or even a veterinarian might have. There would be countless times where I would say, have you thought about this? Or you need to think about this too. Probably in every single study I've ever worked on is knowing the science. It's very, very important. When you, it's also good to speak with physicians too. Physiology is a basic medical science. They would be cardiologists for the most part, and understanding the disease process from them, the pathophysiology is vitally important so that you can, again, be the go-between to translate between the engineers and developing products. Also, it's very important, my physiology background has been very important for having your own startup to understand fully the disease process through experience, how the physicians think and work. So I think my particular degree has helped me every single day of my career.
I think it's great that you emphasize the fundamental sciences and really knowing your material as a researcher and bringing that into the space that you eventually go into, if not at least knowing how to conduct that type of science. Chelsea?
So I come from a biomedical engineering background, and I did quite a bit of applied physics work when I was a PhD student. In addition to, I did quite a bit around biology. I did minors in both of them. So from a purely technical standpoint, I did a lot of research in the neurovascular and cardiovascular systems between my master's and my PhD. I work for Medtronic Neurovascular right now. So from that lens, it flowed really nicely. And many things that I did and I worked on as a graduate student also became very applicable from a technical standpoint, understanding the disease states, understanding some of the current technology that's available for treating them, understanding where some thought processes were on improving those, I had already been exposed to. So from just a purely technical standpoint, that was also really helpful for me to be able to emphasize, and I think definitely played a hand in me getting, my opportunity that I now have at Medtronic. I also think, my postdoc at the FDA, I think also very much helped me. It gave me a little bit of a kind of unique lens to be able to, kind of show some skill sets on understanding that regulatory background and being able to speak to it intelligently. I think any student who's looking at going into the medical device industry, understanding the regulatory landscape, even from just a very basic or high level perspective, is super valuable. And you don't get that as a PhD student. I guarantee most of your professors probably, if you ask them, like, how do you market, like go from start to finish of making a medical product, they probably wouldn't be able to guide you very well. So understanding that and those expectations are also really valuable. And I think that helped me. But then also, I think there's a lot of skill sets as a PhD student that you gain along the way that I've found a lot of PhD students forget that they learned. I think there's a lot of focus on the technical, really down to the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty of exactly what from a technical standpoint. But I think they forget a lot about the other skill sets you gain, such as project management skill sets, being able to set a strategy and then break that down to goals and deliverables and execute to a timeline and being comfortable executing under stress. You know, being very clear in defining a problem statement, identifying how to get solutions and making a plan to get there. You know, ability to distill large amounts of information down to conclusions and being able to form and defend those conclusions. Those are all things that you become very good at in your graduate studies that not everybody in industry is very good at. So I think being very broad and giving yourself credit for those skill sets are also really important. And I think being able to present yourself in such a way where you can highlight those can be very beneficial to getting into industry, because you know, you're going to have hiring managers that didn't come from the same background as you, and so you need to bridge that gap and what do these transferable skill sets mean. So you're going to, and the onus will be on you to bridge that gap, not on them.
I love how you emphasize that it's your duty, it's your job to make yourself shine. Perfect. Chris?
I'm so glad Chelsea went first, because that was an excellent overview of all those skills that you do get in a PhD that you need to remember to bring to the bear. One point she mentioned that I thought is really important is that regulatory understanding, because that's not something you're exposed to in your PhD, and it's the trade-off that you can make between the way the regulatory structure is made and the particular technical considerations you have or physiological considerations. I think having that cross-disciplinary understanding, I think that's where the opportunities are. And so being able to be comfortable with it, we are in a regulated industry. And so thinking that you're like medical devices, I'm just going to do this part, but not that part. I would encourage you to think the opposite way. If you want to learn all of the parts, and the opportunities are when you can trade off between all of them. But from the PhD standpoint, I think I got a little bit lucky that I was doing medical device research essentially as part of my PhD, surgical robotics, and it happened to be that continues to be a popular industry. There was a $3.4 billion acquisition in a surgical robot startup this past year. So I got lucky on that one. So that my specific subject matter expertise continues to help me out. And then if you really do understand the literature in your space, you can start understanding the themes. And as you get older, you start seeing actually all these things start repeating themselves. And so just by going back to literature 20 years ago, you can come up with new ideas that haven't been fully realized, and you start understanding why. And I just wanted to emphasize Paul's point as well, where I've found like understanding the basic engineering and those principles to be very useful. But that communication with the clinicians is a key skill to develop, where the clinicians and biologists, I think that I think clinicians and surgeons in my case, that their education kind of split very early on from ours, from the engineering side, if we're talking about engineering. And so it's very interesting talking to them and how they think and how they're solving problems. And surgeons specifically are crazy people. Like the fundamental idea that they're gonna cut into you and make you better, that's bonkers. And so being able to help them and give them the tools to make their job easy, like getting that in your brain, I think that's a fundamental skill that I did have some experience with in my PhD.
Got lucky with the field. Just kidding. Yeah, it's robotics is definitely growing with the onset of more and more technology development. And then we'll have Harish to close out the PhDs, and maybe we can do sort of like a comparison there.
So interestingly, my PhD has very little to do with what I do right now at Stryker. And it's especially when I was applying for a job, I found myself in the weird predicament of having nothing really fit what I did. And then I realized that nothing would ever fit what I did, because it's a PhD and you spend 6 years literally doing one thing for a very long time. So the only place your real skills would fully be transferable is if you stayed in your lab and kept on doing what you do. So it's good, at least for me, I started to highlight a lot of what Chelsea talked about, the soft skills that you learn as a PhD, adding especially I don't think PhD students really realize how much patience you really have to stick with, you know, the same project for so long. And that's a big thing in industry is being able to maintain that drive towards, you know, fulfillment of a project, because in industry things don't always last 6 years. They're much quicker. So you'll find, you know, having a skill set where you're kind of a veteran of being able to stick something out for a long time, is very useful. The other thing that I realized was, you know, most companies, I would say probably the bigger ones, maybe more so than the startups, they're not expecting you to know everything coming into, you know, a new job, especially if, you know, the skill sets that you have don't necessarily adapt very well to the job that you're applying for. And that's okay. They will realize that there is a learning curve associated with what you're going to be doing. And, you know, that was kind of a load off my chest, because, you know, I've been in this company for, you know, a year and a half, and I'm still learning everything every day. And I like I said, just highlighted more of my, you know, soft skills that I had, because with that, you know, those 3 wonderful letters at the end of your name, most companies realize that you know, you're pretty good at what you're going to be doing because you got that PhD, and it applies to MS students as well. Having that grad degree kind of already shows that you have what it takes, you know, to be a high performer at any job that you might be given. So, you know, scientifically, I have been able to transfer a lot of my, you know, my foundational skills. As a bioengineer, you're kind of a jack of all trades most of the time. But it was more my soft skills that kind of really landed me the job. You know, one thing that's really important as a PhD, because you're in the weeds so much, it's important, and I suggest that anyone who's a PhD student really start practicing, know how to explain something, you know, to any audience member. If you're speaking to somebody in regulatory, giving the nitty-gritties of cell culture, it's not really gonna jive very well. Being able to explain what you do and apply it to a very specific audience is a good skill set to have, because not everyone is going to have the technical background that you have, you know, focusing on your project. So being able to explain and speak well is probably one of the biggest skill sets that I think if you don't have, then you should definitely cultivate, and if you do have, really highlight in your resume.
Yeah, that's great, especially in terms of you won't know everything, unfortunately. In whatever position that you end up in, you won't ever know everything. Well, there are some spots that you could end up being that. But let's go ahead and move it to Erin.
Sure. I definitely can't say that I was in school that long. I can't imagine having to be in school any longer than the extra 2 years that I had to do for my master's. So I commend you all for getting a PhD. That takes determination and drive and passion. But at my master's, at least, it was a little bit more specific. So I was a little bit more fortunate to be able to learn a little bit more about the different sectors of the life science industry. So it was a little bit more specialized. So that's how I learned about the regulations, and then more on the clinical and the statistics side as well. So that's where I kind of got my foot in the door, at least with regulatory, because I did have to learn about it. But in those initial jobs, or the initial job that I did have, they didn't expect me to be able to write a submission and get approval right away. So don't expect you're not going to need to know that. But at least from having those extra years in my master's, the projects that I was on, and having to kind of juggle things a lot, moving between teams, that's something that I have to use daily, working with different departments and communicating really well. I'm sure if you guys are, what are they called, TAs, like being able to communicate with your students and stuff like that, that will really help. I know I'm still struggling a little bit with the different departments and how they all work. So I guess that's something that I'm also working on. But I don't know. It sounds like a PhD gives you a lot of soft skills. But that my main thing is communicating. And I know in my interview, my manager now was saying how my critical thinking was one of the things that she really liked. That I was able to gain from the different projects that I had been on. So to kind of look at that as well as how you can critically think and solve problems, kind of like what Chelsea was saying. Those soft skills will go a long way. Even if you can't use them right away, they are something that will make a difference in your job, and your managers and your teams will recognize that. See what else, other soft skills. I think that's what mainly I kind of focused on, was communication and just being able to multitask and work on multiple things and not let things just fall off your plate, because that is a big issue. If you forget things, obviously, you want to make sure you do all your jobs.
I love how detailed you all are getting into your answers. I'm going to challenge you, Suresh, to keep this in 3 minutes.
Sure, I will try my best. So in terms of how the masters really served me well, I'm a big believer in things applying. You're not really inventing the wheel. There a lot of wheels have been invented, and exposing yourself to different research, different different industries, and I think as a biomedical engineer, you get to do that. You get to look at what the mechanicals do. You get to look at how the electricals approach problems, and it's a really, really good way to get exposure to that, because ultimately what I've found is I'm able to take a lot of that and apply it to a different problem, and it often works really well. So getting yourself exposed by getting an advanced degree is a good way. And one of the things that kind of drove me to getting my advanced degree was I was kind of getting to a point in my industry career where you're bored with what you're doing currently. Let's say you get stagnant. You want to feed your, I think there's a word for it, I'm blanking on it, but it's a curiosity quotient or something like that. I don't know if you guys have a better word for it, but it's a constant need to feed that. And by taking these classes, I found myself, re-inspiring myself to look into other technologies, learn more about different physiologies, and physiologies play a huge role in terms of your ability to be successful in it. So, having transitioned, my first startup was neuro, the second one was lung, now, back to heart. Those learning curves have been really steep. I've been fortunate enough to have a decent background to where I can pick up on those things and be able to have those clinical conversations, as the group was mentioning. So that's how it's served me.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and weave in some of our audience questions. There's one from Kristen earlier. Erin and anyone else can hop in on this if they have something that they want to add. What resources did you utilize to land your first job at Medtronic and help you transition to your current position? And that's for Erin.
So for my first job at Medtronic, how I learned about the job was actually through my school. So it was through a job posting that they had posted. So definitely take advantage if you're still in school, any of their events that they have or any postings that they have. So that's how I learned about it. But that job is actually a contract job. So that was something, it was only temporary for a year. So obviously you don't get as many benefits as being a part of the actual company itself. But that's how I kind of got my foot in the door and was like, okay, fine, I'll do the contract. Learned a little bit more about regulatory affairs and Medtronic as a whole as well. And then once I had the name Medtronic on my resume, a lot of people, recruiters and stuff, were kind of pinging me on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's always a good resource. You definitely want to have that. There's so many people and how you connect there as well. And then I ended up transitioning to Endologix. So I had Device Alliance had an event with Endologix. So that's kind of how I found out about the company. And they had.
I think you cut off, Erin.
You don't know about?
Okay, we hear you. My
AirPods died. So I learned about Endologix through Device Alliance, and because there's just so many companies out here that you might find out at a new company about a different opening that you would have never, you were just looking online. So that's kind of how I utilized my school. And then the contract is a little bit iffy sometimes because you want to obviously have a full-time position, a little bit more stability, but you kind of take that chances sometimes. And then obviously Device Alliance was another resource that I utilized to get my second job.
Great. Did anyone want to hop in or make a comment? All right. So another question that we have is from Swati. I have extensive research experience in academia, but no prior industry experience. And now I want to transition into regulatory affairs or quality control field. I have been writing to industry professionals for informational interview opportunities, applying to entry-level jobs, speaking to recruiters, but it's been radio silent. How do I get my foot through the door? And anyone can take it.
I would, the first advice I would say is definitely keep going, because I literally experienced the same sort of radio silence for a while. Honestly, you just need one. And it's really about just, especially in this environment now because of COVID, it's just constant, I think in my 4 months of unemployment between my PhD and Stryker, it was almost like a routine. I'd wake up and then I'd apply for like 5 jobs every day, like no matter what. It's almost like working out. You just got to keep doing it. And eventually one will click. And, I can't stress enough, definitely shake that network that you have like vigorously. Don't fall short of, Stryker for me was a 4th degree connection. So it was my dad who knew somebody at Intuitive Surgical, and he sort of harassed me to apply there, and I have no robotics experience. And I was like, well, this is not going to work. I'm a bioengineering. I have no mechatronics, no robotics experience. And when I applied, the guy got back to me and said, your resume looks perfect for Stryker. I happen to know someone there. Do you want me to forward it to him for you? And that's kind of what got my foot through the door. So I can't stress enough, don't underestimate the 3rd, 4th, 5th degree separation connections in your network. Like that is what will get you the job. And literally keep going. It sounds frustrating. I was there too. It sucked, but it'll happen. You just got to really keep pressing, and eventually you'll find one.
I think Chelsea, you have a comment?
Yeah, I would just really agree with that. So I think coming out of your PhD, you are going to have to really rely heavily on your network. So I really encourage networking through organizations like Device Alliance, or my postdoc was sponsored by the American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering, AMB, which I'm sure many of you know, and I'm sure many professors at UCI are members of. And through having connections with AIM because they sponsored the postdoc, then I got to know people on their industry panel, kind of subsection of the organization, who then worked for Medtronic, who then I kept in contact with, who then passed my resume to several people. I think that's a really common way for PhDs to get their foot in the door, because when you're just kind of submitting applications online through job postings, you don't always know who's on the receiving end of that and who's reading that. And they might struggle a little bit kind of parsing through what your PhD is to pull out those transferable skill sets. If it goes directly to the VP of R&D or to a director of R&D who maybe does have a PhD, they can read through that much faster. And that's how I got my foot in the door, is my resume landed on the desk of the VP of R&D for Medtronic Neuro. And he gave me a call one day, and then that's how that happened. So that's I think really common. So definitely very much rely on networking, and then have people help you on your resume. I think a lot of PhDs get so in the weeds of the technical details that that probably gets lost on sometimes who's reading it.
It sounds like a lot of networking is important for where to go for your next steps. This is predominantly for Harish, but everyone else can jump in on it as well. How did you know which position suits your background? Because it sounded like there was a disconnect there, And then how did you make that bridge?
So that's a really good question. So when I was applying, it seems now it seems like it's real overkill, but it helped. I would print out the job posting and copy down each bullet point about like what the job is looking for, and then I'd literally write on Word how my experience matches that specific bullet point. And it was sort of a piece of advice that, one of the panelists that I was talking to at the time told me. He said, if 70% of what you're writing sort of matches what the job posting is, apply for it. And then, on the other flip side, if it didn't match 70%, I'd still apply for it anyway. But I got much more hits when it was about 70% of my experience adapted enough to match the job posting. And that's kind of what I did. I sat for every single one and just wrote, how my experience can be adapted or exactly fits the bullet points. And it doesn't have to fit 100%. You can kind of, if with cell culture, I said, I know the process for cell culturing, and my next focus is to move into animal studies. Like that's the next sort of leap in what I want to do for a job. And that's kind of how I framed my experience when I was interviewing for my preclinical role. So it's kind of a grind, but it also helps you understand, yourself, and kind of helps you market yourself a little bit better if you have these pre-prepared, answers to why this job fits your experience. So that's kind of how I sat down and, saw whether or not my background really worked with the job I was applying for or not.
Just curious, how long did it take for you to find that position?
So I started kind of casually applying for jobs, around like March timeframe of 2018. And I defended my PhD and kind of left around September. So that was like, maybe 1 or 2 postings a day. And that was more when I was growing my network. It took me about 4 months of really hardcore job applying. Like that's the only thing I did and focused on all day, every day. So I started applying in September of 2018, and I started at Stryker January of 2019. It's just a grind. It's just like 5 jobs every day, no matter what, kind of like working out.
I think, Chris, you had unmuted yourself. You wanted to make a comment?
Oh, yeah, and I agree with what's been said so far. On the flip side of like reading resumes and hiring folks, that the step between submitting a CV and then getting the interview is different than having the interview to the job. So I think just putting in the time and doing that network gets you over that first hump, because PhDs aren't really well set up for just online job postings. For the online job postings, it's like we need an electrical engineer, we need we need a programmer, and those are the jobs that get posted. So if you can tailor yourself to some of those, but usually those are not the jobs that you want. But just remember, like that's out there, and those are the ones that are getting posted. So try to find some other way in, and persevere. But then once you're at the interview, you do want to work on interviewing is a skill independent of all the other skills that you've got. So you do need to work on that as well.
Great. Another question that we had, I've been told that industry cares more about experience rather than education. Are there positions where a PhD is essential versus a master's? And do many people complete a postdoc prior to moving into industry?
I could say initial stuff I think it's different from biology versus more medical devices. I think there's a big difference where like postdocs are a lot more common before going into industry. I think if you are doing some lower level engineering or engineering that requires expertise, that's where the PhD is required. But it hurts you as much as helps you for a lot of these standard jobs. Where like you don't have, if you're a mechanical engineer, you don't necessarily know how to write up mechanical drawings so that they can be reviewed, and you don't have from a medical standpoint, you don't understand the processes, and especially from a regulatory affairs point, if you don't know the regulations, then the PhD doesn't help you at all. So finding those specific jobs that let you learn all those other things that are specific for the industry. That's what you're trying for. So I think the PhD does help you out for the specific like technical expertise, but for everything else, you need to be willing to learn.
I think
I might have something to add.
Go for it.
Sorry. So I personally am not in the clinical department, but one of the teams that I know of at my company that likes to hire a lot of PhD students is our clinical statistics. So obviously you guys work a lot on papers and figuring out how the data works. And so that team specifically loves PhDs because they do know how to work through the data, how to articulate their findings, and then giving it to the engineers or to regulatory to kind of explain that further to then the FDA to get approvals based on that clinical data. So that's kind of the PhD that I'm aware of in my company.
I think earlier, Suresh, you wanted to add something? Sorry for that.
Yeah, I wanted to add something to the previous question. I think it's important to be smart about the job application process. And I think some of the colleagues alluded to it earlier. There's a HR, so there's a job posting in between all the applicants and the hiring manager. There's the HR person, and most of everything that they're putting out is boilerplate material. So don't get discouraged by something that says 10 years experience, must have this. Most of it's boilerplate. Do apply. So that's number one. The other thing, I think Harish was getting to it or hitting on it. It's do your research. Find out more about the company, the specific product, and tailor your application to kind of not only just check off the boilerplate asks from the job posting, but also show that you know a little bit about the company, you know about the products, and research into competitor devices and the the pathophysiology, and just show that. And I think that can really help you stand out from a pile of resumes.
Thank you. Okay, another question. I think this is more geared for Aaron. How do you apply for contract jobs that are not typically advertised on job sites? And maybe, I think, Chris, you could talk about other jobs that are typically not found.
So there are like consulting firms. So the one that I specifically applied to was through my school, so that's how I found out about it. But Planet Pharma is the contracting firm that I went through, and so they post a lot of jobs that they're helping companies fill. So you just need to find those contracting firms. So I know of mine, the one that I worked with was Planet Pharma. So I'm sure there's a lot of other ones that you can probably look into that specifically post those for other companies.
Chris, did you want to add anything, or do you think that was covered well? I guess we're going to keep going then. Another question is quite relevant for all of us. Do you recommend applying during the current situation now of COVID-19, or is it better to wait until things have settled and then apply for jobs? And you might even want to comment on some of the changes that you've seen in your industry or field. Chelsea?
We're still hiring. I'm still interviewing people most weeks for different positions we have open in several different departments. So overall, the medical device industry, while it was impacted by COVID, it was probably far less impacted than many other industries. People still get sick. For my neurovascular, people still have strokes. We still have to make product. We still have to ship product. We're still pushing through on our new products. So and many other medical device industries are like that. I think right now it's probably highly specific to not just medical device, but you have to look at the specific company and the specific types of products, because some are more related to more emergent sort of disease states or solutions than others. So, and even across Medtronic, different businesses were hit harder than others. So, but we're definitely hiring, and what work looks different right now. Most people are working from home. You don't necessarily get to see your manager face to face who's hiring you. WebEx interviews, it is a little bit of a shift. It is a little bit more challenging, but we definitely are still kind of moving forward. At least Medtronic Neuro is, and I'm still working on site about 50-60% of my time too.
Rish?
Yeah, it's also kind of echoing what Suresh was saying about doing your homework about the company. So, I mean, Stryker Neurovascular, we're not hiring as much now, but Stryker's an old company. It has several divisions, some of which, you know, I mean, not to say they're opportunistic, but their business kind of boomed because of COVID. So the medical device equipment division of Stryker is doing very well. So I would definitely say, you know, I think despite whatever, you know, job situation is right now when it's affected by the pandemic, you know, not applying will always be the worst thing to do. So even if it's not the best scenario for jobs, apply anyways, because you really never know. And, you know, yeah, do your research on the company. If neurovascular isn't really hiring, there's orthopedics, there's endoscopy, there's medical equipment, there's a lot of stuff that, you know, is out there that could be booming and probably needs a lot of support right now. So definitely look into the company and see what products they're marketing, and that might give you a pretty good roadmap as to where to apply, especially in this current situation.
Great. Paul, did you want to, Paul?
Two things. First of all, you never know when your particular perfect job is going to be posted. So always look and always apply. Secondly, a lot of people don't understand, if you're in academia, is that every company has what's called a fiscal year calendar. And that means that at the beginning of their fiscal year, they are sending out they're posting, you know, 75% or more of all the jobs that they're going to have for that particular year. They go through these long corporate strategies for how many jobs they want to post. And so you have to be aware of those fiscal years and then head for those particular companies. Like at Medtronic, their fiscal year begins in May, if I remember correctly. So right now is the first quarter of the fiscal year. So all kinds of jobs are being posted now, and so it's a hot time for Medtronic to hire. So they're just going to hire because they have to hire. And so that's something that people need to understand about all the various companies, and try to find out when their fiscal years are. So then you can focus your particular effort on them. Towards the end of the fiscal year, you know, as Chelsea would probably tell you, don't even bother with that company. A lot of companies will have hiring freezes in the last quarter of the fiscal year. So that's a dead zone for that particular aspect of things.
Great. So we are running up on the time for our networking session. I know we had another question, but you're more than welcome to ask that question because it's very specific for you. And then right now we'll be moving over to we'll be moving over to the networking session. Oh, perfect. Harinder has it there.
Yeah, I just want to make sure people don't lose it. Otherwise, check your email. You'll have it there.
So we'll be closing this call, and then please make sure you go ahead and click on that link or open up the Zoom using the meeting ID. But thank you all for your insights and thoughts. I love how explicit and very detailed you all were. Very insightful.